Hello everyone, welcome back to our YouTube channel Board Bros. This video is a part of our MCP series where we are exploring the model context protocol. In our previous video, we have built Command MCP Server and we have learned how we can execute the external command using the tools like npx to connect our MCP server, and we have also learned how MCP server communicate with our local tools like local file system using these external commands. So in this video, we'll explore remote MCP server in UiPath, and we'll also understand what exactly the transport is in MCP and what are the different transport we have in MCP. We are going to build one remote MCP server using FastMCP, and we will connect to that in UiPath Orchestrator, and we will test that remote MCP. So by the end of this video, you will understand how remote MCP server works. So let's get started. So remote MCP server, which is hosted on internet network server, like on the cloud server or on your machine, which can be accessed through the HTTP by any client. For example, if your MCP server is running on a different machine which is hosted on the cloud or needs to access multiple users or multiple clients, so this is where this remote MCP server works, where we need to expose this MCP server over the internet, so your MCP client can connect remotely, like multiple clients can connect this remote MCP server. So unlike local MCP server which runs on the same machine, if take an example for local MCP server, for Command MCP server, where we have built local file system, right, where we have client and server which lives on the same machine. Like I have created that MCP server on my machine, so this will work only in my machine. So if someone else needs to access that MCP server, so we cannot use this local MCP server. So in that scenario, remote MCP server we can use. So this remote MCP server uses this HTTP transport, which allows the tool to consume remotely across different systems. So your any MCP client can connect to this remote MCP server. Now let's understand what is transport in MCP. So in model context protocol, transport is the communication channel between your MCP client and MCP server. So your MCP defines format of the messages, while your transport defines how these messages travel between your client and server. So this transport defines how messages are sent and received between client and server. For example, your client sends a request to execute a tool, then your transport carries that request to the MCP server, and then your MCP server execute that tool and sends back a response to the same transport. So without transport, your client and server cannot communicate. So what are MCP transport type we have? So first one is STDIO transport, that is nothing but standard input output transport. So your MCP server runs as a local sub process, like your server and your client live on the same machine. For example, cloud desktop cursor VS Code, it's like one client one server process. In our previous video for Command MCP server, we have used this transport STDIO transport because our MCP server was running locally on our machine. The second one is streamable HTTP transport. For streamable HTTP transport is how MCP works over the internet, like where your server exposes the HTTP endpoint. So your MCP server runs as a standalone web service. So it allows your MCP server to expose through the internet, and we can access it through the internet. Then multiple clients can connect to this same MCP server. So your MCP server acts as a remote service. So this message format remains the same, only the communication channel changes. So communication channel nothing but STDIO, streamable HTTP, these are the communication channel we can say. So in this video we are going to use the streamable HTTP transport because we want our MCP server to accessible over the internet. We have understood what transport is and what are the different transport types. So for this remote MCP server demo, we are going to use gnews API, which will provide the news article and top headlines. So we are going to expose as a tool. So first one is this search endpoint, which will give us the news article based on these parameters. Like, so here you can see the parameters based on the keyword it will provide the news article, and also we can add the language as well, like based on the language it will provide the news article. The second one is the top headlines endpoint. So the parameter which we are going to use is category. So the here you can see the default value is general. So we can use the different category like general, word, nation, business, technology. So based on the category, then again for the language as well, it will give us the top headlines. So let me show you the code. So this is the MCP server which I have created. So here you can see I have imported the FastMCP, then I have created the initialized this MCP which name as my remote MCP, and I have created the API key which I have kept here, and I have created the two tools. One is the get news and another is the top headlines. So for get news we are going to use the parameters like the topic, then the language, then maximum result which we are going to retrieve, and then the API key which we need to pass. And this is the API endpoint which we are going to use for this tool. So here I have created the topic as input and the language also as an input, then it will give the output as in the form of string. Similarly, for top headlines as well, based on the category, so we have created the input as a category string. So by default, it will be the general, but we can change it if you want. Then for the language as well, we can just provide the language, and it will give the top headlines based on this category and the language. Again, same for the this is my endpoint, and the parameters we are going to use is category, then the language, then country. So country we have already passed by default as India. So if you want, you can also create again the as an input, and you can just pass that country and maximum result which we are going to retrieve. And here the main part is the transport, right? So I as I was talking about the transport that we are going to use as a streamable HTTP which will be over the internet. So here I have passed as a streamable HTTP, and I have passed the host and the port. So let's run this and let's see how we can test this. So let's me run this. So this is how we can create this remote MCP server. So here you can see it has started my MCP server. My remote MCP is my MCP server name, and with the transport streamable HTTP on this my local host. So let me add another terminal and let me open my MCP inspector tool. Model context protocol, then inspector. So this is the command to open the MCP inspector tool. So here you can see it has opened the MCP inspector tool. So the transport type is streamable HTTP, and this is my remote MCP URL. So currently it is running on my local machine. That's why the URL is showing localhost. So let me click on the connect. So here you can see it has connected, and my remote MCP, this is my MCP server name. If I go to the tools, list the tools and the get news. So here you can see two tools we can see. One is the get news and the another is get top headlines. So let me provide like agentic AI, and the language I'll keep as English. So let me run this tool. So it has successfully ran. So here you can see result, we can see the title, then the source, then publish date, then the URL from which source it has retrieved that news article. As we have kept the parameter for maximum result as a 5, so here you can see the top 5 it can retrieve. So this is how we can test this remote MCP on our local machine. Let's see how we can configure this in our UiPath cloud account, like in the orchestrator. So let me navigate to my orchestrator here. Okay, let me go to my MCP server, add MCP server and remote MCP server, right? So if I go and copy this URL, so this is my MCP URL, right? Like remote MCP URL, and here I'll just say my MCP, right? So if I click on add here, so I'm getting this error, block for security reason, local hosts are not allowed. Since our MCP server is running locally, so our UiPath orchestrator is running on the cloud and which cannot access our local machine using the local host. So to make this server available over the internet, what we are going to do is we are going to use the Ngrok. So Ngrok is basically which will create the secure public URL, and it will forward all the request, all the MCP request to our local host, to our local MCP. So let me show you that as well. If I go to Ngrok and if I go here and if I simply log in here, so here this is the Ngrok which will forward all the request which is coming from our cloud and which will forward it to our local host. So here you can, what you can do is you can just simply install this Ngrok. As I have already installed this Ngrok, you can simply it from Microsoft Store, or you can just run the command and you can just simply, so this is the token, you can just make available. So you can just simply run this command on your laptop. So your Ngrok will create this public URL, and this public URL we are going to add in our MCP server. So what we will do is I'll just simply open my CMD and I'll say Ngrok HTTP 8000. Okay, so here you can see, so this is my local host, right? In the MCP inspector tool you can see this is my HTTP local host 8000. So this is my MCP URL which is running on my local host. So what I'll do is I'll just simply copy this URL. So this Ngrok URL create the bridge between your internet and your local host. I'll go to the add MCP server and here I'll just simply say this URL and /MCP. I'll just click on add. So here you can see it has forward all the requests to our local host, and here you can see the response as well. So if I open this one, right, so this is the post method which has sent from our UiPath cloud account, and here if I go here you can see in the tool section we can see now the get news and the get top headlines. So first one is the get the latest news for topic, and second one is get top headlines by category. So this is how we can create the remote MCP server in UiPath. So what we have did is we have just created the MCP server, and we have created this through the Ngrok. It will create the public URL and it will forward all the requests to our local host. What we will do is like we will just simply go to the studio and we'll just test this MCP, how this MCP work. So I'll just go to agent. Okay, let me start fresh and let me go to the form, let me go to the tools, MCP server. So my MCP, this is my remote MCP server. So whatever MCP, whatever the tools we will execute, right, the HTTP request, so here you can see all the details. If I go to this Ngrok, you can see all the requests. So post method, get method, here you can see the responses as well, the 200, then for the post method as well. So let me go to my agent. So okay, here you can see the get news, the input which we need to provide is the topic and the language. So let me provide the just simply system prompt. Need to run the my MCP server tool name. Let me copy this tool name from here. And here also we will provide the same, and we will provide the input parameters. Pass below parameters. The first one is, let me see what is the first one is for get news, topic and the language. topic, let's see, UiPath we can provide, and the language we can keep as en. Okay, and let's see, run this MCP server where, how it works. Okay, it has started. So now it will call the remote MCP server which hosted on my local host, and Ngrok will forward all the requests from cloud to local host, and it will give the response. Then again we'll see the response as well. So agent is still running. So here whatever the request will get, so all the requests here you can see, and also you can check on the Ngrok here, on the Ngrok as well. So whatever the request we will get it from the UiPath cloud, so it will get it here as well. So here you can see we just now receive this tool call. Here you can see the topic we have provided UiPath, and the language is English. And here also you can see my tool currently running, that is nothing but tool get news. And if I go to the agent output, if I expand, so here you can see top 5 news article we have retrieved. We have provided the topic as UiPath and the language is en. So this is how remote MCP server works in UiPath. I hope this video helps you understand how remote MCP server works. Thank you.